This is Outdoor Life and Liberty. Welcome. My name is Michael. I am your host, and today is December 14th, 2024, another glorious day in these United States of America. We've got a lot to cover on this episode. As promised, we will have a gear review, but we've got a lot of news to kind of go over and review, and then some information in my uncommon sense section that is, I think, very interesting. One of the sources I'll point out right out to make sure that for full disclosure for my uncommon sense will be from the Declaration of Independence. Yes, this is one of my pocket copies. I carry one with me most places I go. Never ceases to amaze me how much people do not know about our most important founding documents. But handy to have one of those around. So we'll dive into some things right away. And then when we get to the gear review, I'll be showing you some gear. Um, and again, pretty important uncommon sense section this time. So I hope everybody stays tuned long enough to get to that. So on with the show here. So the first information I believe is from Newsmax. I also believe there's some information here today that's going to come from Newsbusters and some from Patriot Post. If you guys have never heard of or tried patriotpost.com, check them out. Really good site. So moving right ahead, although the Department of Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz determined the FBI did not deploy undercover agents at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, he did reveal the agents had 26 confidential human sources from various field offices in Washington, D.C., in the crowd that day. And by the way, when you're working as a confidential informant, you're working as an agent of the state. It's not like you're a citizen volunteering information. They're held to the same standards that you are in law enforcement once you become an agent working for the state. Any of you who have had law enforcement training know that that is true when we're talking about informants. They can just inform confidentially, um, or they can be informants that are set out to do certain things on behalf of the police, which makes them an agent and subject to the same sort of scrutiny as law enforcement. So these people fall into that category. 26 people didn't call in as a confidential human source. 26 people who they knew, but they're going to keep their identity confidential, were set out into the crowd as agents of the state. Horowitz's assessment was disclosed in a report released Thursday on the FBI's handling of confidential human sources and intelligence gathering in the lead up to Congress's certification of Joe Biden's victory over Donald Trump. Horowitz wrote that three of the 26 confidential human sources were tasked by FBI field officers before January 6th to report on domestic terrorism subjects who are possibly attending the event. So there's all you need to know for the legal point of view. They were tasked. The FBI went to them and said, "We want you to go and find this out for us," which at that moment makes them an agent of the FBI and subject to the same laws and restrictions that apply to a law enforcement officer. He wrote one was tasked to report on the activities of a predicated domestic terrorist subject who was separately planning to travel to D.C. for the election certification vote. Another was to potentially report on two domestic terrorism subjects from another FBI field office who were planning to travel to D.C. that day, and a third who informed their handling agent they intended to travel to D.C. on their own initiative, and who then was asked to potentially report on two domestic terrorist subjects identified by other FBI field offices who were planning to travel to D.C. that day. He added that none of the three was authorized to enter the Capitol or a restricted area or to otherwise break the law on January 6th, nor was any confidential human source directed by the FBI to encourage others to commit illegal actions, and none were to enter the Capitol nor the restricted zone. Of the 26, Horowitz reported, four entered the Capitol building during the riot, and an additional 13 entered the restricted area around the Capitol, a security perimeter established in preparation for the certification vote. And nine of them neither entered the restricted area nor entered the Capitol or otherwise engaged in illegal activity. Now, listen to that. The other nine neither entered the restricted area or entered the Capitol or otherwise engaged in illegal activity, which means that the 13 they're talking about did. They violated their rules, according to the FBI, that the FBI laid out for them, and did illegal activity on the Capitol. However, none of those 13 are part of the January 6th people who were convicted in the kangaroo court and sentenced for what people are calling an insurrection. And I got to tell you, if you honestly think that what happened on January 6th, that photo op, was an insurrection, you're clueless as to what an insurrection is. An insurrection would be, a few hundred of us descending there with our guns and taking over the Capitol, not taking over an empty building, taking over the government. That's an insurrection. That did not occur, which is why all the charges, all those sitting in jail for that, is trumped up bogus charges, should be pardoned by Donald Trump. We'll wait and see. It said none of the confidential human sources who violated the rules, engaged in illegal activity, entered the Capitol and restricted area has been prosecuted to date, he wrote. The Washington field office did not know that a total of 26 confidential human sources would be in D.C. for the events of January 6th because only four field offices had informed the Washington office or FBI headquarters that confidential human informants under the relevant field office's jurisdiction, 5 in total, would be traveling to D.C. on January 6th. Horowitz determined that many of the CHSs provided confidential information relevant to the certification vote before January 6th, and that a few CHSs also provided information about the riot as it occurred. In addition, FBI field offices collected CHS report relevant to the January 6th electoral certification from CHSs who did not travel to D.C. for the event. The report revealed among the informants the information, rather, that CHSs provided to their handling agents was that extremist members of the Oath Keepers or other groups may become involved in an unplanned violent activity on January 6th, that the number of Oath Keepers headed to D.C. is 200 plus, travel plans being discussed by Proud Boys, an individual purporting to be the leader of the group that had 500 people willing to storm the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, and concerns for the safety of members of Congress on January 6th. So, again, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, are certainly not a terrorist organization. They're actually people who are just very firm in their belief as that the Constitution should be followed and that the government is continually falling short of that. But the woman who was shot and killed by a black police officer who was a D.C. Capitol police officer was neither armed nor posing a threat at all. In fact, she was on the other side of a locked door that the officer shot through to kill her. And the one officer who eventually died a couple days later died because of a coronary event, had unrelated to the insurrection. So one innocent American killed by D.C. Capitol Police. I guess the liberals' view on that is, oh, it's only one. What does her life matter? But again, she was in a crowd of people, and she was on the other side of a closed door, and he shot through the door and killed her. It's very clear on video. You can go on TV or all over the internet and find it. In any police department, and I do have a law enforcement background, that would not be a justifiable shooting. That would be homicide, and he'd be going to prison. Moving on, that's just as terrible as that gets. The United Federation of Police Officers, a prominent law enforcement labor union, has announced its unwavering support of Kash Patel as the next FBI director, highlighting his extensive track record in justice and national security ahead of his Senate confirmation hearing. This is according to Breitbart. In a letter to federal officials, the UFPO, representing law enforcement professionals nationwide, praised Patel's qualifications and urged his confirmation. Quote, Kash Patel is a shining example of dedication to justice, public safety, and accountability, unquote, the letter stated. It highlighted his career as a federal prosecutor, where he partnered with law enforcement agencies to dismantle international drug cartels, prosecute violent offenders, and take down entire criminal organizations. The UFPO underscored Patel's commitment to law enforcement and community trust, noting his respect for the service and sacrifices of officers across all levels of government. The organization also lauded Patel's tenure as senior counsel to the White House Intelligence Committee, where he played a pivotal role in covering what the UFPO described as the politicalization of the FBI during investigations into former President Donald Trump. The letter said his efforts were instrumental in promoting governmental accountability and transparency, values critical to fostering trust in law enforcement. Patel's leadership, when he was chief of staff to the acting Secretary of Defense, was also commended. His service as chief of staff of the acting Secretary of Defense further underscores his leadership skills, his commitment to national security, and his ability to manage complex organizations under pressure, the organization added. With the FBI at what the UFPO described as a crossroads, the union called for leadership capable of restoring public trust and reinforcing partnerships between federal agencies and local law enforcement. Patel, it said, is uniquely qualified to meet these challenges. Quote, Kash Patel has shown time and time again that he has the vision, courage, and expertise to do just that, unquote, the letter stated. His unwavering support for the rule of law and his dedication to protecting the American people make him the ideal candidate to lead the FBI during these challenging times. The UFPO's endorsement, signed by UFPO President Gerald J. Flynn Jr., concluded with a strong appeal for Patel's confirmation, expressing confidence that his leadership would restore integrity to the FBI and strengthen ties with local law enforcement nationwide. Well, there's a lot there, and I think that I wholeheartedly agree. Kash Patel may be one of Trump's best picks. He is way, way more qualified to be the director of the FBI than the current director of the FBI, who is resigning, and the director before that. So all these left-leaning Democrat demagogues who want to inflict socialism and keep their power on the United States of America are, of course, going to have a problem with him because he's actually going to be a fair and impartial and transparent FBI director, and they're losing one of their most politicized, important tools in their chest to wreak terror on those that they disagreed with. So I think that the more that you see people like John Bolton and anyone else on the left raising alarm bells about any of Trump's picks, especially John Bolton, who's, besides being a hair-lip walrus who was incompetent and was an appointee in between sessions himself, is only really he got the job that he did because he's such an idiot. But anything that John Bolton sounds worried about, is against, and sounds an alarm and hair on fire, means that we've picked well. So I think Trump has done an excellent pick with that. So here's a little more information about that tragic assassination of the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, which occurred last week. And what's been happening since then is revolting, makes me sick to my stomach. But again, it's kind of like the same thing when I heard all these women that were self-sterilizing themselves because Trump won. I'm all for it because that just means there'll be less people reproducing the kind of people that don't think the way the majority of us do. And that's fine by me, not keeping that in the gene pool. So if you're a lady thinking of sterilizing yourself because Donald Trump won, go for it, I say. 100% support. I would love for you to do that. So, moving on to this story, in the wake of the arrest of the left-wing assassin, and by the way, they earlier, if you recall, tried to say that he was a Republican and a conservative. He is not. He's a left-wing socialist nut job, this little boy that did this assassination. So, in the wake of the left-wing assassin who killed United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, it was discovered that he used a 3D printed so-called ghost gun. Never letting a good crisis go to waste, on Tuesday, The View wanted to exploit the situation to push for gun control. ABC News co-host Joy Behar, how do you pronounce that stupid bitch's name, and Sonny Hostin demanded a crackdown on homemade firearms and betrayed their ignorance of it being an American tradition dating back centuries and to before the founding. Behar was manic because the U.S. Supreme Court was set to hear a case regarding the Biden administration's actions against unfinished 80% lower receivers. As an example, quote, another point, these ghost guns are up for discussion at the Supreme Court right now, so let us hope they do the right thing because, let me see, they do not have serial numbers, unquote, she huffed, as if serial numbers allowed authorities to magically pinpoint where a gun was on the globe. Flaunting her ignorance of the work involved and equipment required to finish an 80% lower receiver, Behar decried how, quote, they are sold online as do-it-yourself kits, unquote. She falsely claimed the guy can make one of these guns in the same way that he can text me. I don't know what that means. she's obviously totally ignorant about anything to do with firearms. And as a '07 FFL, which means I'm a gun manufacturer and seller, I can tell you there's a lot of stuff involved, and an 80% receiver is not a little kit that you do quickly or easily and without knowledge. And the whole point of that. And by the way, the ATF allows manufacturing of a gun a year by individuals, and those do not have to have serial numbers. The law implies that it would have to have a serial number should they give that gun that they made or sell that gun to someone else, which in many states would require an FFL and to be logged into a book and to be accounted for. But if you make it for yourself and you keep it yourself and it doesn't have a serial number, there's nothing illegal about that, not even under the Biden administration. So they're just showing their ignorance. Where that would come into play is if they tried to sell or give that gun that they manufactured to someone else, then it would have to be registered with a serial number. She went on to say that she hoped Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett would join the liberal justices to, quote, save this country, unquote. And I'm glad that most people now realize this hair on fire rhetoric when they do that. Before, 8 months ago, people were listening to that and buying in and going, yeah, yeah, yeah. And now they're no longer a source of news or anything that anybody puts any credence in. But it is a great source of entertainment watching their hairs go on fire about stuff they don't even have a clue about. They went on saying, despite being a former federal prosecutor, Hostin proved that she didn't know anything about the case before the Supreme Court by conflating 80% unfinished blowers, which are made of metal and need to be milled out with power tools and milling machines and drill presses, with 3D printed models. Quote, so we're not sure why this happened, but we do know the instrumentality that was used, and it was a ghost gun that can be printed on your computer, unquote. Okay. It can't be printed on a computer. A computer doesn't print anything. A printer prints, and a 3D printer is a piece of engineering equipment that makes things out of polymer and to exact standards. So she doesn't even know the difference between like a computer and a 3D printer. And she was a prosecutor. What does that tell you? Doesn't take a high IQ to get a law degree or become a prosecutor. That's for sure. Well, actually, I probably had 6 years more college than most of them just to get my archaeology credentials. So not surprising. Obviously clueless as to the fact that those unfinished blowers were incapable of accepting ammunition, let alone fire, which is the upper receiver's job, by the way. Hostin whined that lobbyists lobbying were pointing out that this is not a firearm. It obviously is a firearm because the man was killing using one of them. And that's going to be in front of the Supreme Court, she declared, with zero knowledge. And the Supreme Court is looking at whether or not it's considered a firearm. Of course it is, unquote. Well, of course it's not. It's a block of metal. An 80% finished receiver is one solid block of metal. There's no moving parts. There's no openings like to put a magazine. There's no way to connect that to an upper of a gun to make a complete gun as it is. It's a piece of anodized, treated, hardened aluminum that you have to have a milling machine and or a drill press and jigs and a bunch of stuff to complete. So, just wow, just the amount of stupidity uh, displayed on the View. It really is. If you're looking for a way to just to laugh yourself silly till your sides hurt, watch the View. I mean that I say kudos to their ignorance. Um, but as the Reload's Jake Fullman points out in his October 8th headline on the case, quote, the Supreme Court weighs when parts become a firearm, unquote. And Justices Samuel Alito and Barrett boiled down the case with an analogy asking when do ingredients become a completed meal? Here's a blank pad and here's a pen, right? Is this a grocery list? Judge Samuel Alito asked Solicitor General Elizabeth Proglar. I put it out on the counter, some eggs, some chopped up ham, and some chopped up pepper and onions. Is that a Western omelet? Would your answer change if you ordered it from HelloFresh and you got a kit and it was like turkey chili, but all the ingredients were in the kit? Justice Barrett said, following on Alito's analogy. The justice spent nearly 90 minutes going back and forth with attorneys on both sides of the dispute, probing where to draw the line between a collection of unfinished gun parts and a completed gun under the statute, Fogelman reported. Of course, Hostin completely ignored that it was completely legal in America to make your own firearm and that it was a tradition dating back centuries to before we were even a country. We're talking colonial times. But that didn't stop her from using to besmirch America, one of her favorite hate objects. When you have something that someone can make in their home and you have the lobbyists saying, but no, and the gun manufacturers are saying these are just hobby guns, and so, they shouldn't be regulated, says a lot about our country. Which, again, if I handed you some tires and threw an engine on your floor and tossed a suspension in your backyard and said, hey, you've got a car, I'm going to tax you because you've got that car, it wouldn't fly, right? So obviously, it'd be common sense. You don't even have to know a lot about guns to understand common sense is those parts, not guns, they're parts. Just before they wind out at homemade firearms, Behar also lashed out at Republican Senator Ted Cruz for condemning left-wing violence like the assassination of Thompson. Quote, of course, Ted Cruz has to politicize it and say it's a left-wing thing, she shrieked. And why does Ted Cruz insist on dividing Americans even further? Although that's not at all what they're doing with their leftist hate rhetoric and calling people Hitler and stuff like they did. That's very kumbaya and altogether. Behar was previously used her platform on the show to erroneously claim that gun owners have a mental illness and that Republicans make a lot of money off children's deaths. So, Joy, who's the real divider in America? There's so much there to unpack, but I think most of that spoke for itself, right? In the United States of America, the gun industry is probably the most highly regulated industry in the country. As a Class 07 FFL, as a manufacturer, and a SOT holder, which means I can have NFA items I make, like machine guns, and suppressors, and the like, which are all very highly regulated. It's always been known that an 80% receiver means it's kind of in the shape of a receiver, but it's a solid block of aluminum. And you can't just like take that home and sit at your kitchen table and make it into a gun. Again, it requires I use a CNC milling machine for my receiver work, but even a manual milling machine, or they sell jigs that you can do it if you have a really high-end, decent drill, a drill press that can cut through the metal precisely. And it still requires a lot of measurement and a lot of precision and hours and hours and hours of work. So just can't account for stupid. I used to see a T-shirt that says you can't fix stupid. I'm having one made that says, "Oh, I can fix stupid, but it's gonna hurt." Maybe I should put that out here when we get those done. So we'll move on to another subject that came up. This would have been the end of the news section, except that this popped up between when I was preparing for this episode and this episode's airing today. This is the one that I believe comes from the Patriot Post. So it doesn't seem like too long ago, but there was a time when Black Lives Matter really mattered. Think back to 2020 when the Marxist group was on the march, rioting all during that long, hot summer, wrecking and burning and looting, defacing and defiling statues of Washington and Jefferson and even the great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln. That caught our attention, sure. But think about corporate America back then. Think about JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon and the rest of them coughing up all those millions to the race hustling racket known as BLM. Think about the Democrats in Congress ostentatiously taking a knee in the Capitol building while donning their African clothes, and at the same time shrugging their shoulders at the execution style murder of a 5-year-old white boy named Cannon Hynat, who had been out riding his bike in front of his house when he was shot point blank in the head right in front of his sisters by a 25-year-old black neighbor named Darius Sessoms. But while Black Lives Matter riots of 4 years ago were precipitated by the death of career criminal George Floyd, they had their roots in a couple of racial riots from years earlier. There was the phony Michael Brown hands up, don't shoot hoax of Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, followed by the Freddie Gray riots in Baltimore a year later. There was also the Kenosha, Wisconsin riot of August 2020, following the thoroughly justified police shooting of a thug named Jacob Blake, a riot that caused a kid named Kyle Rittenhouse to defend his own life with deadly force. In each of these cases, the anger had been directed at cops specifically and at white supremacy more generally. Thankfully, though, that Black Lives Matter dog no longer seems to hunt. And see, that's a Southern phrase, which is why I like that writing. That dog don't hunt. So Black Lives Matter dog no longer seems to hunt. What was once righteous anger in our urban centers and even suburbs has been replaced by an almost comical indifference. It seems, thankfully, that the American people, black and white, have come to realize that not every black and white encounter has a racial atrocity on the level of an Emmett Till. Take New York-based rabble-rouser Hawk Newsome, for example. The co-founder of the Greater New York Black Lives Matter chapter has been out front lately trying to make himself relevant by protesting the death of a deranged and violent career criminal named Jordan Neely, ostensibly at the hands of a heroic Good Samaritan and Marine Corps veteran named Daniel Penny, whom a Manhattan jury on Monday rightly acquitted of any crime whatsoever. Here's what Newsome had to say about the dismissal of the most serious charge on Friday, which came before the acquittal. By the way, to put that in perspective, they dismissed the most serious charge, and then the next week when they got together on Monday, they acquitted him. He said, quote, "Today, white supremacy got another victory. Today, the KKK, the Klansmen, the evil in America got another victory." Predictably, Newsom and his fellow radical arsonists doubled down after Penny's ultimate acquittal on Monday. "We need some black vigilantes," he said, following the verdict. "People want to jump up and choke us and kill us for being loud. How about we do the same when they attempt to oppress us? America will never fix the issue of black people," he added, "because America needs a punching bag, and they have designated us as the punching bag." "Small world, buddy," said Newsom in a not-so-veiled threat to Penny, while his sister Chinova screamed that America is a effing racist country. Well, I wish one of them would jump up for no reason to try to choke me, especially if there's more than one of them, because that's called a disparity in force, and then I can use deadly force to repel that. Well, that would be awesome, dude. So if you want, I'll self-dox if it'll help you come to my house, and we can reduce the world of a few more absolute assholes. Well, unfortunately for the Newsoms and for almost everybody else trying to make a buck on the race industry, business is bad. The Federalist Brianna Layman, wrote earlier this week, quote, on Monday, 12 New Yorkers refused to buckle under the weight of racial grievance politics. Perhaps this verdict serves as a bold sign that America's finally had enough of the Black Lives Matter hysteria and mob mentality that demands guilt despite the facts, so long as the accused is white, unquote. Indeed, even in Manhattan, which votes nearly 90% Democrat, and whose woke district attorney, Alvin Bragg, routinely sees the world through race-colored glasses, they're saying enough. And I think there's some really good points here. I mean, it's come out already that Black Lives Matter misused their funds. They lied to their own people. Their agenda has just been race baiting and race grievances. And that's been their politics. And it just doesn't fly because, frankly, there are far more racist countries than the United States of America. I have many friends of many different colors, if you will, and they're all very happy to be here in the United States of America because they're all patriots who stick up and take responsibility for their own actions, expect others to take responsibility for their actions, and follow legal avenues for the redress of grievances, such as the court system. So when you get a guy who's got over 40 convictions, is high on drugs, is physically rushing at women saying he's going to kill them, and another man restrains him. And if you watch the police body cam, interestingly enough, restrained him till the police got here. Once he left and was being questioned, the subject was still alive, but died shortly thereafter, according to the coroner's report, probably having to do with something with the coronary event caused by all the drugs in his system and then the additional stress of being restrained, put him over the top. And the only reason he had to use that, which was showing a lot of restraint, is because he probably wasn't allowed to carry a concealed carry gun in New York City. Had that happened here in Ohio by me, it would have ended much quicker and much more without a long, drawn out filming time. It would have been bang, bang, and the situation's over and done with. But that's because we live in the United States of America, not New York City. So now we're going to move on to uncommon sense. And it's going to be short, but it's going to be very, very important. And I'm going to start with just quoting something from the Declaration of Independence. Quote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unquote. Hopefully all of you are familiar with that. I hope. If not, please read the Declaration of Independence. Because there's a lot packed into that are super, super important. And there's some terms in there that are a little confusing because the words that they used are different than what those words mean today. And the way they viewed them and their definition was all very different. So first off, I'll point out for those who say God has no part of our country, no part of our founding, no part of our government, all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. So what they're saying, that's natural law. They're saying that all humans, when they are born, have given to them and ordained by their Creator, their God or gods or goddesses, by whatever your ethos and your orthodoxy and your religion, whatever that belief is, you're endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. So it's unalienable rights. And that among them, so there are more than what they're listing, but among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, life is what it means. Liberty is actually a very interesting word. We're going to do a whole episode coming up, a section of it on the difference between what liberty is and what freedom is. Freedom, you're free to think whatever you want. That's freedom. You can express what you're thinking. That's freedom. Liberty means you can do whatever you want. There's a large difference in the law and in reality with the definition. But I'm going to focus just for a moment on that last part, which is pursuit of happiness. And I want to tell you that in when you're reading something in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, um, words are fairly stable. When you get to the 19th century, the 1800s, some of them start to change and morph. And then when you get to the 20th century, the 1900s, that's when things really start switching around. But what happiness meant until the early 1900s, all through most of the 1800s, and certainly all of the 1700s, both the classic and Enlightenment thinkers, they defined happiness as the pursuit of virtue. I'll say that again, as written in our Declaration of Independence. Happiness means you're allowed to pursue. You're made a state of happiness by pursuing virtue. For people who aren't really a wordsmith, I would say that the happiness means being good rather than feeling good. In the 1900s, happiness starts changing to how you feel. I feel happy, which means you feel good. You're having a good time. But prior to the 1900s, that's not what that meant at all. By happiness means you are pursuing virtue by being a good person. That is the state of happiness. So it's important that we understand what that language means in the time in which it was written. This is borne out in several books. I'll start doing a book list that I'll start including books that I recommend for you to read. And I will cover this next week with what book I would recommend you read on this subject matter. But it's very clear that to the founders, they are putting that up with as an important, it's at the top three, if you will, because it says among these are many unalienable rights given to you by your creator just by virtue of being alive. But among them, so I think they're emphasizing where life, your right to life, liberty, your right to do what you want to do, not just express what you think and talk about what it is that is your opinion, but doing what is your opinion, and kind of an bridge to that, and a pursuit of happiness, which is the pursuit of virtue, which is being good. So life is important. Liberty, your ability and right to do what you want to do, and the pursuit of happiness, what you should be doing is the pursuit of virtue. In other words, being good rather than feeling good. It's only recently that the human species have come to the point where it's all about me and everything. It's the me society. And you see that a lot in all of the progressive politics. It's all about personal attacks on people. It's all about them doing whatever they think they need to do for their happiness, meaning feeling good about what they're doing and about themselves versus being good and the pursuit of that virtue, which is doing good. So it's important that that distinction be made when you're reading our founding documents. So that's what I got for our uncommon sense section. I'm told by a lot, probably 6 or 7 out of 10 comments say that that's their favorite section. So we will continue going along that. Now I'm going to be standing up here and showing you something. Today's gear review. We're going to be talking about Safe Light Defenses Level 3 Plus body armor. And my rig that I use with and without ceramic plates inserted, which give a level 4 anti-rifle protection on this. And why it's important that you have some body armor. So with that, let me snag this up here. bring this over, and it's quite heavy because I do have the plates in it. But this is my, I'll hold it up so you can see it. This is my Safe Life Defense brand um, body armor. This is an armor carrier. It's obviously not concealed body armor because this is designed to defeat very heavy weaponry compared to concealable body armor. Though I would recommend if you don't have any body armor at all, at least consider some concealable body armor, if not some external body armor as well. So first off, before I talk about this specific thing, why is this important? Well, in the case of without rule of law, which we've talked here before about, whereby you're not going to dial 911 and help is coming. Or even if you live in a very rural situation, as I do, where you can call 911, help might be coming, and in 15 or 20 minutes they arrive. The reason the body armor is important is because it can keep you in the fight. It can keep you alive. Now, it's not a cure-all, fix-all. There are many, many ways to be shot and killed while wearing body armor. I'm not going to go into all of those techniques and tactics because that would kind of defeat the purpose of me telling you about body armor. But I will say if you take a good tactical course, that stuff will be reviewed. But the reason this is important is because it's relatively quick to put on. These side things here are Velcro. I unvelcro typically this side. You can slide the vest over you from the side, reseal that, and it's on. So very quick to put on. And what that provides you, if you've ever shot a pistol routinely or even a shotgun routinely, and you've taken any sort of training, you'll realize that the recommendation is to shoot center mass. And what center mass means is the center of your chest, because that gives you the largest point where you can miss where you're actually aiming and still be hitting the target, right? So you're kind of shooting in the center of their mass. But also, what's in the center of your mass if you think about it? Well, right here would be my heart, my aorta, my vena cava, my lungs, and my spine, all of which hits on can be ending my threat to you very quickly. So most trained shooters and even untrained shooters kind of instinctively shoot from middle or center of your mass to try to stop you because that's where a lot of vital stuff is. And it's a big enough area that even a slight miss will still score a hit, if you will. Or if you think about a headshot, headshots can be done if you're proficient. But the problem is if I miss here by 6 inches, I'm still taking out a lung, I'm still breaking bone, I'm still bleeding, probably bust my scapula on the way out. If you miss here by 6 inches, you just missed, right? So to increase your hit potential on your target, it's usually recommended you shoot for center mass, and that's where this comes in. It protects your vital areas, and it's created or made, if you will, with a couple of layers of protection. If you go Safe Life Defense, inside the vest itself is soft body armor, a 3+. So what 3+ means, the reason I like Safe Life Defense is a level 3 body armor, or 3A even. Stops projectiles up to a certain rating, usually a 44 Magnum, 357 Magnum, a 12 gauge shotgun, or the upper limits of what soft body armor are going to be stopping. But none of the regular 3 or 3A do anything to stop like an ice pick. If somebody were to take an ice pick and stab you in the chest with it wearing soft body armor, you're going to get stabbed because it doesn't have the velocity of a bullet, so those fibers aren't grabbing that as quickly or as well because it's going slower than a bullet, and it's got such a tiny sharp point that just weaves between the fibers and gets into you. So the Safe Life Defenses 3+ body armor is a 3A soft body armor that is stab resistant. So you can take an ice pick, and I've taken an ice pick on one of their vests on a demonstration and hit it with a hammer, and I can't get it through. So it gives you stab protection in addition to bullet projectile protection. But this pouch that I'm reaching into to show you. That's where the ceramic plates, which this is, that are also in this vest that go over the soft body armor. And what's the advantage of this? Well, the advantage, the ceramic plates, and they make steel plates too, but there's some real advantages to ceramic over steel, but they also cost more. Is they're multi-hit capable. If you keep hitting the same spot on a piece of metal, that metal fatigues, like all metal does, and eventually a round could punch through. Where on ceramic, it fractures and moves and covers that, so it could take multi hits better. As you can see, very hard. I mean, that's a hard plate. Um, and there's some alternatives. This plate is very heavy. It's probably 16, 17 pounds as it currently is. And it's so heavy and it kind of restricts you in a little bit of ways that when I train, I actually train with the vest on and off. So I'll run my drills on my weekly drills with my vest off. And then I put the vest on and I run the weekly drills too, because it changes things like how you shoulder a rifle. This is pretty thick with the plate. And so, how you shoulder a rifle, you need to shorten the stock a little bit to get the correct distance between your eye and your optic, to eliminate parallax and such. So, it's important to practice if you get yourself a set of body armor, both with and without it, frequently. If you can't afford the rifle plates to start, that's fine. They're 3A armor. I think you can get a not in a tactical vest like this, but in a regular carrier that you can wear on or under clothing is sub $1,000, and it goes up from there. Of course, they also have their flex plate, which is a plate like this or whole body armor that'll stop the lower rifle calibers like 5.56, 5.45. 7.62 by 39, and it's flexible, so it's more comfortable than this plate. This plate is rated up to like 30-06, 50, the 7.62 by 54 are Russian rounds. It gets into a higher caliber ability to stop. But you can certainly get a flex plate over your soft body armor, and it'll weigh less than this. And the way mine is rigged up, you can see I've got my magazine pouches right on the front, in addition to my Viking patch and my flag. I am of Nordic descent, and I have ancestors who were Vikings, and so I'm kind of into that. And even here, you'll see I got a little patch on the back. Got a handle, so if I become a casualty, people can evacuate me by pulling the handle. It's got these little holders which you can route a microphone from your radio through. You have it handy dandy. But again, the reason that's important is because if somebody's breaking into your house and the police are, even if the police aren't a ways off, you want to protect your heart, your lungs, your aorta. Um, so putting on the vest increases your likelihood to survive should the person that you're encountering actually get shots off at you. Still doesn't mean they don't accidentally hit you in the throat or hit you in the head, although that's a hard target, or hit you in an arm and a leg. And that's why we have tourniquets and gunshot wound kits. But it spares you getting hit in the heart, lungs, aorta, spine, etc. So it just is another layer of protection. It's not all that expensive. It's not any more expensive than many guns that you might be buying to consider for defense. And it just adds that layer of um, probability, of decreasing your probability of being killed. That's a great way to put that. So I recommend that. Now you can buy just soft body armor that they say is concealable, though when you get to 3A and 3A plus, it's so thick you can see it under a shirt, but you can wear it under a shirt. But Safe Life Defense also sells Hyperlight now, which is a super thin. I mean, it's really very thin body armor that is bullet and stab resistant, and you can wear that under a shirt. And frankly, I don't notice it. So I do wear that when I'm not wearing my vest and I'm going out at my house to do a lot of stuff. Sometimes I'll just throw on the Hyperlight concealable soft body armor just to give me that edge, because most threats are going to be stabbing or handgun threats. And as I said, it'll stop up to 12 gauge shotgun pellets and the like. So it gives you a lot of protection. And if you want to upgrade to those flex plates, which are really expensive but very light, or add ceramic plates or steel plates, as mine has the ceramic, but ceramic or steel as an additional layer, that brings the level of protection up to, 30-06, 308, 54 Russian, all those things, 7.62 by 54 Russian, are defeated by the heavier armor. So it really depends. If you're going to shoot the odds, though, it's better to have at least the standard set of 3A or 3A plus soft body armor than none. And if you decide going to the heavier plate is something that you want to do and you need in your kit, then by all means, I would say add it. Now, there are many different brands of body armor. I'm just using Safe Life Defense as an example because bang for your buck, they give you very good armor at a pretty dang gone reasonable price. But all the big brands, Second Chance and they I believe they were the first that actually come out with the practical usable police body armor back in the day. There's several Gauls. If you shop at Gauls, they have their own body armor now. In addition, the ABA makes body armor. So there's many companies out there, but bang for buck if you're not made of money and you're not Elon Musk, though I love you, bro. But if you're not Elon Musk, Safe Life Defense is a good place to be shopping for your armor. They even have payment plans if you can't afford to just pay all that up front. So that'll conclude our gear review. I'm going to move right along now into our last section, which is our humor section, brought to you, of course, by the great folks at Babylon Bee, who I love. I'm looking for other Patriot Post sometimes they have what's called the Memesters Union. They have some great cartoons and stuff up there as well. I had mentioned them earlier, but Babylon Bee really is the bee's knees when it comes to humor like this. So here goes on current issue humor, brought to you by the good folks over at Babylon Bee. From the United States, despite currently being in custody and charged with the murder of health insurance company CEO, the alleged assassin Luigi Mangione has now taken the lead in the 2028 Democratic primary polls. Though more well-known candidates like Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, and Gretchen Whitmer remain in the running, Mangione had surged to the top of the polls in just a matter of days, following his rise to stardom among Democratic voters after committing a cold-blooded murder in Manhattan. Quote, "He's the perfect representative of everything the Democratic Party stands for," said MSNBS host Rachel Maddow. "He's ruthless, uninformed, deranged, and he's willing to kill people he disagrees with. These are all fundamental qualities Democratic voters look for the most. The only factor that may hold Luigi Mangione back is the fact that he's not legally old enough to run for president yet, but whether or not something is legal has never held the Democrats back before," unquote. Thanks, Rachel. Voters were quick to throw their support behind the accused murderer. Quote, "He's the guy I want," said registered Democrat Dean Stinson. "It's time to get serious about the progress we want to see in this country. Someone with a killer instinct. Who better than an actual killer? The way he dealt with that health insurance guy, he's such an inspiration to us. It's exactly what we all want to do to the opposition. Who cares if he gets convicted of murder? The Republicans can run a felon. Why can't we?" Unquote. At publishing time, congressional Democrats were reportedly working on legislation to simultaneously pardon Mangione and legalize the murder of people they disagree with. Well, that's certainly, I mean, that is funny, but that's actually kind of the idea you get if you ever watch the lamestream media like MSDNC or CNN and other fake news outlets. But that'll wrap up our edition here. I will throw in our email address as usual. This request for a body armor was sent to us through our email address as something they'd like to see reviewed. So if you have any comments, concerns, criticism, kudos, recommendations, people you'd like to see or gear you'd like to see reviewed, please email us at outdoorlifeandliberty@gmail.com. That's outdoorlifeandliberty@gmail.com. Well, that wraps up this episode 13 today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate the fact that you could be doing a lot of other things rather than watching my ugly mug talk to you about the news. Um, we're going to be starting a website soon that'll kind of have all this information on it. We'll get that to you as soon as we can. In the meantime, I would say train hard, fight smart, live free, and die well. I am Michael. Thank you for watching this episode of Outdoor Life Liberty.